I guess you're the company man now, and you said,
I'm a little bit of everything. I'm in this unique position where I'm also the morning guy, as fish in the morning. So I have to have that persona, and then when I get off the air, I have to turn in to the company man, but I'm still the boy downstairs. So it's a weird balance, but the man upstairs is what pays the boy downstairs. So I've got to really kind of put the emphasis on the man upstairs. So kind of really having to split two roles for myself.
now I would ask, are you personally the man at the station, or are you taking your orders from a corporation?
Well, we have, we are owned by a parent company called Saga Communications. And for the most part, they let us run independently, but they have a certain set of guidelines and numbers that you have to hit in order to keep your, if you will, your store, your shop operating, which is what WKVT is. And any radio station is. The only difference between us and, say, WTSA, which is independently owned, is that we all still have those same set of numbers that we have to hit if we want to remain in business and operating and creating jobs and giving back into the community. None of it happens unless those numbers are where they're supposed to be. So Saga will tell us, give us certain guidelines in which to hit. It's kind of nice because they hand you your mark and you have to hit your mark. And luckily we do that often.
That's interesting. So you do have a level of independence, provided that you turn over enough money at the end of the month for them.
As is the case with any business, in any business you're operating, whether it's a retail store, a restaurant, a radio station, a trucking company, if you're not hitting your numbers, you're not in business. So we don't operate any differently than anybody else in that capacity.
Does the company have a feel for the local community, and therefore what's realistic, what isn't realistic? Are the numbers, like the assembly line, being turned up and up and up and up to the point where it's going to become staggering, or is it pretty reasonable?
It's reasonable because we set our own mark for the most part. So they'll ask us, and it's interesting timing on that question because we're just starting that process now where we take a look at the 2016 budget. And the 2016 budget will always ask for a slight increase, and as a business you hope to increase and make more money, and that affords you the ability to do new and different things. But it starts from the salespeople, and we ask them to give us a certain increase, normally 3%, which seems to be reasonable, 3 to 5%. And of course, if the company is making more through the salespeople are making more, everybody's happy in that capacity, as long as, again, those marks are being hit. And so we'll tell them, and then they'll take a look at the bigger picture with all the other radio stations that are owned by Saga Communications, and then they'll say, yeah, that's a reasonable amount, that's good, go ahead and hit that. And then I have to then take a look at overall expenses. Are there any more reductions that we can do in expenses? In other words, not ordering bottled water and just taking it from the tap, silly things like that that reduce expenses and increase what they call cash flow. They are what they call a media company, and when, I guess it's about a little over 10 years ago, they purchased WKVT from the people who owned it then. So we don't need them, but they own our radio station. So
they just bought.
They bought.
Okay,
Exactly.
so they own it. Okay.
Yeah. So that sort of answers that question.
Do you like the position you're in as far as the marks versus what you can do independently, or if you wish there was more independence, or do you feel like you have a lot?
You know, we have quite a bit of independence, I have to say. I mean, Mr. Holiday referred to kind of that being able to do our own thing, and they really do depend on us, the local people, to kind of say, so we need to be involved in this, this, and this, and they're very accommodating as far as just letting us kind of do our own thing. But as long, again, but that accommodation stops if the numbers that that we've set forth on ourselves aren't being hit, then we have to really take a look at that. Because a lot of times, when we step out into the community, there's an actual physical cost associated with that, that the radio station has to pick up. Project Feed the Thousands is a great example. So when we step out, we do a day-long broadcast or a food drive, or something, there's actual physical cost that's associated with that. But if we're hitting our marks, then it's not a problem.
So how did you get into the business of being a DJ?
Lost a bet.
Lost a bet?
It's not really lost a bet. I've way back when, I think I've been doing the morning show now for about 15 years, but I started doing a specialty blues program on WKVT many years ago. And at the time, the morning DJ had expressed an interest in not doing the job, and then just one day decided he wasn't going to do the job, which literally left me the only person knowing how to operate the radio station. And so I filled in for a couple of days until they could find somebody that was suitable to move in to morning drive, because I was not a morning person. When these guys are getting up to go to work, I'm going to bed. That's the way I was, and that was over 15 years ago. I just sort of got in there, liked it, felt like I was good at it, and just kind of kept doing the morning show.
What kind of skills did you need, like, going into something like that?
Going into the morning job?
Yeah, and like broadcasting.
Yeah, into broadcasting. You know, you gotta really kind of love it. You gotta sort of like it. You have to. It basically started for me with a love for music. I love blues music, so that's the show I started was the Blue Cadillac, and at the time it was on Wednesday nights, and it went from 6 to 8 o'clock, and that was it. And I would do a 2-hour specialty show. And so it all starts with a love of music, and of course just being around music. And if you love music, I think most people do, it made it an easy transition. But then you have to sort of kind of prep and be ready for it, and kind of have a little bit of a gift for gab, which I have. Yes, you do. You have to do that. Now, I grew up listening to classic rock music. That was the music that I cut my teeth on, that I grew up loving. The classic rock music, Led Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac, the Rolling Stones, all these classic bands. So for me to go to work for a classic rock station was easy. It was the music I love, it was the music I grew up with. Music is very hit driven. All right, so there's a lot of people who just are into the music so much that they don't really care about the hits anymore. They appreciate them, but they like what the stuff that's deeper on the album is. So those are the people that we don't necessarily cater to. You know, we don't necessarily, but we do have programs in which they can come and listen to a certain time where they won't hit all the hit music. But you know, I mean, my love for the blues came from reading a Led Zeppelin album and not recognizing a single songwriter that wrote any of the songs that they were singing. And when I did a little deeper research into who wrote these songs, they were blues legends. So I began to buy their albums, and that's how I began to really love and appreciate the blues and the crossover between rock and blues. Other artists like Little Willie John, who was you know, just these old school, old Chicago style blues, which is my favorite stuff. But those are the guys. But Stevie Ray just kind of slowly took over, and he just crosses over a lot of different formats often. Good. Music's a good thing to like. It's a powerful. You can find a lot of healing. You can find a lot of your soul in music. It's a really important entity. And the funny thing is, if you tune into a radio station, and I know now, as a business, as what we call, what I do for a job is called terrestrial radio, which just means you can pick it up over the airwaves for free. Mm-hmm. And now I know that everybody in here owns an iPod. I own 5. I don't judge it. You know, iHeartRadio, the digital formats, Pandora, all the other things that we compete with those. So we have to, you know, we constantly have to evolve. And everything that we do, everything that you hear when you flip on a terrestrial radio station is a commercial. A song is a commercial. If we are programming our song list correctly to keep you listening, that'll keep you listening through the paid commercials, which is how I get paid. And if the DJs are doing their job correctly, they'll get you to listen through the end. So everything that we kind of hear should be keeping you, called a time spent listening, and keep you in for long blocks of time so that you can hear a commercial that you might react to, go buy the product, say you heard it on the radio, and then that's all good for us. But, you know, the retailers now are savvy locally, and they know how it works, and if you do it correctly, which is why music is so hit-driven. If you listen to WKVT, which is also owned by Saga Communications, if you listen to WKVT, you probably, maybe one of the things you might say is, you know, I just heard that song an hour and a half ago. But it's hit-driven, and if it's charting, if it's high up on the charts, you're going to hear it more, especially if it's popular. I mean, Uptown Funk is a great example of that, right? I mean, it seemed like I couldn't get away from that song for a while. Now it's starting to die down a little bit, but it was a hit-driven song. People want to hear it. You have to give them as much opportunity to hear that song that holds them to the radio station. You know, for us, it's, you know, the classics like Stairway to Heaven is, for a classic rock station, is one of the signature tunes that you have to play not at every hour and a half. A song like that might appear every 2 days on our radio station at different times to give an audience a different time to listen to it. I hear the song by the Kinks, Lola, a lot, but that's because I sit in the radio station and I hear it all the time. And then I'm always amazed when somebody will go to my Facebook page and say, "Oh my God, thank you for playing Lola. I haven't heard it in 5 years." I just heard it 5 minutes ago. What do you mean? 5 years. So it's different. For me, I have to kind of remove myself from that and listen through your ears, who you might just pop it on for 10 minutes on your commute to school in the morning, and then don't turn it back on until the afternoon for 10 minutes for your commute home, or to practice, or to wherever you're going. So that's how we have to program.
How do you guys go about determining what's going to be on the track list?
It's a really good question. We do things called music testing, and they are done usually about 2 or 3 times a year. We subscribe to the service, and they put a big pool of people within our age demographic, which is anywhere from 25 to about 55, and they'll literally say, "What do you think of this song?" "Oh, we love that song." "What do you think?" And all the songs everybody says that they're sick of hearing always come right up at the top of the music testing, so it's really conflicting. So it's basic music testing, but also, and this is where we get back to us operating a little independently, where we live is a little different, right? I mean, it's not, I can't expect the same exact playlist that is even in Springfield, Massachusetts, to play well up here. We have what we cater to a little bit of a kind of a crunchier demographic that wants a little bit more Grateful Dead. They want a little bit more Allman Brothers. They want a little bit more of that. So we put that kind of music in because we're sensitive to that, because we broadcast here. We can't play the same thing that a New York City classic hit station is playing. We have to put a little texture into the playlist, and so
That's fine.
yeah. So that's what we do. Yes.
What do you kind of aim for as an average time that you want listeners to stay on the radio for? What's the goal?
Well, the goal is to hit the average. And when I started in radio, we could say the time spent listening was about 35 minutes before you would change the channel. Now it's down to 8. And that's universal, whether you're listening to WKVT, whether you're listening to a country station, whether you're listening to a classic hit station, whatever. The time spent listening on the average is anywhere between 8 to 12 minutes, depending on where you is. For us, for a classic rock station, we'll be closer to that 12-minute range. For K&E, it could be less. It's just because you can kind of pull it up on demand. So, we obviously hope for 12 or better, but there's a myriad of different reasons that people switch the channel. Commercial. DJ just said something stupid. I've heard that song 5 times today. They constantly pushing the dial, and if they get sick of it, we lose them to a digital platform for a while, and then they come back. But if something happens in town, and here's a great example, when Tropical Storm Irene hit. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. All right. Laser focus on what terrestrial radio was doing, because nowhere else where you're gonna get serviced like that, to know what's happening, what roads are open, what roads are closed, what emergency meeting is happening, you know, what roads have just opened, what roads have just closed. It was just, so there was that. And for that time, we were locked into the radio station for 7 or 8 days. I probably got collectively over that span of time, maybe 20 hours of sleep over an 8-day period, just covering nonstop. So that's when radio can really shine and really service the community, which is at the bottom line what we're really there for.
You were talking about how hit-based it is, like when you're playing songs, so do you find that there's a lot of songs that you personally used to like a lot, but after you hear them like way too many times, you just end up hating them like completely?
The Eagles. When I took the job, I loved the Eagles. Now, don't get me wrong, I still like the Eagles, but I become that kind of deep cut listener when it becomes the Eagles, and play the tunes that I don't have to hear all the time, like Hotel California. I went into this job loving Hotel California. Now it's dangerous for everybody around me if it starts playing. So yes, there is a certain amount of burnout. But if I step away from it and I haven't heard Hotel California for a little while, and because I have to schedule it, because it's one of those songs that always tests in the top 10 when we do music tests. So it has to get played because you haven't heard it as much as I've heard it. So if I have successfully avoided it for about a month to 6 weeks, I don't mind hearing it. The pain has kind of drifted away. But yeah, to answer your question, sure. It's like any other job. There's parts of the job that you love, and then there's parts of the job that you once loved that are just kind of mundane, and that gets to be that way. You know, it's really strange. Since day one with radio, there are things that we have to sign now called anti-payola plugola, which basically means way back in the inception, people used to come in from record companies and say, hey, I'll play you $50 if you play this song 20 times over the next 2 days. Sure. And the radio DJ's like, hey, make an extra $50. Well, we can't do that anymore. So most of, now with everything is downloaded, we can take a song now and play it a few times. You can play it like 5 or 6 times, and if it doesn't get a response, then, you know, it's time to go. But it depends on what that song is. So for us, it's hard because our music is kind of already there, and it's already crafted, it's already been recorded. Yeah. We already know how it tests, we already know what's a good tune and what the bad tune is, at least as far as we're concerned, we know. I mean, you can get into a lot of philosophical conversations over certain tunes that should be played more. But if a classic rock artist who was big in the 70s and 80s has recorded something new, we'll play it because it's new and it's different and it gives my ears a break. Yes?
What would you say is like a successful song that's like something new like that you've played that's like really been something huge for you guys before? Like, have you had a successful song?
Well, I mean, all we do is we play successful songs, but I think probably, you know, like the Rolling Stones cut a song recently about a year ago that we gave a little bit of airplay. But the problem with classic rock artists from when they started out to classic rock artists now is that they fall, unfortunately, under the same kind of new music guideline testing. So it might test really well for about a month to 6 weeks, and then it'll just disappear. Now, doesn't mean I stop listening to it. I mean, some of that stuff I still have on my iPad. When I go running right past this classroom, I will be probably listening to some of that stuff that doesn't test well, but that's just what I need. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Sort of.
All right.
Where do the test stats come from? Who tells you that this is a song to keep playing, this is one, let it go?
Honestly, it can go all over the place. What we watched, we laughed about 10 years ago. All of a sudden, Stairway to Heaven, Freebird, Hotel California, these things that are just what we call the redwoods of music. They just stand large and loom for centuries. All of a sudden, Stairway to Heaven dropped down out of the top 100 for whatever reason.
That's so cool. That's
Right.
really cool, yeah.
It just disappeared. It was out of the top, it's never out of the top 10. It was just strange, and then, but you can't stop playing it, because you know it's an anomaly.
Does your parent company know when and how many times you play a song in a week, for example? And can they tell how it's been received by the audience?
They can tell how we rotate it. We use a program called Music Master. So I will pump all the music into Music Master. I will set the how it's supposed to rotate. So if like Stairway to Heaven's not supposed to come up, but for every 36 hours, and it can't be in the same day part that it played 36 hours ago. It'll push it out to play 40 hours from now. It's a very intelligent program, and it makes programming a radio station, which is something I also do, a little bit easier. But we don't know, other than doing when we get the music testing, we don't know how it's doing. We just know that it's a hit and it should be playing. We'll put out a poll. We used to do this. We haven't done it in a while. We probably should, but just say, let us know what songs you want to hear, and it's a blank poll that you just said, I want to hear this. That's submit. And inevitably, if we get a couple of hundred responses to a question like that through an internet poll, we find it aligns fairly. It's pretty faithful to the actual music testing, so it always sort of comes back. Nobody really ever complains that you play your favorite song too much, is what we sort of find. I mean, if you like a song and you hear it, you're happy. So.
Another thing, how do you determine your target audience? For example, you'll be saying, playing music for middle school kids and probably wouldn't be too profitable.
Right.
Who's your target audience, and out of curiosity, are these folks included in it?
These folks are always included in it, because I think that the funny thing is like I, growing up as a kid, had an appreciation for my parents' music, and they were that doo-wop era, and so I always had an appreciation for the music, and I had never minded listening to the music, but I didn't go out and actively purchase the music. I think that may have changed a little bit, though I don't think that everybody in this room is running out to buy old Rolling Stone albums. Could be wrong. Show of hands, how many of you have bought a Rolling Stones album?
My parents bought them all.
So, but I mean, if you hear a Rolling Stones tune that you like, you probably will listen to it and go. But our biggest demographic is probably ages 35 to about 55. So that's our target, that's our demo. And we try to program our station to hit more of a female demographic. Here it's very hard, no matter what happens, that you end up about 50-50. And it's just because of the lack of choices in radio stations. We also own The River. You guys listen to The River? Yeah. So The River is one of the signals that comes out of my building, and that's a very popular demographic here, because, as I said, it really does play to that crunchier demographic that just likes a wide variety of music. Identification and how radio gets its message out, how they sell their advertising, how music becomes a hit is repetition.
Okay.
So we have what we went through a decluttering phase about 10 years ago, where you would hear that wooga wooga between every single song. So, The River does a really good, we call it imaging. So you always know what you're listening to. Now, there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is so that you know who you're listening to. We want you to know what your favorite radio station is. We want you to know that you can listen to 95.3 or 101.5, or if you want classic hits, that you're listening to 92.7, or if you want our news talk format, you're listening to 100.3 FM or AM 1490. So those identifiers will always be out there, so you know where to go back to if you enjoy the program. At the top of the hour, you will always hear, so right now at noon, kicking off the commercial-free lunch hour is Linda Steele with what we call a legal ID, which will always be a city of license and frequency, so WKVT FM Brattleboro. because if somebody has a complaint, they need to know where to look you up. So,
Or a compliment.
complaint, no, mainly complaints. We do get a few compliments from time to time, but there's that old adage everywhere that you do right by one person, they tell one person, you do wrong, they tell 10. So if there's some kind of a complaint, somebody will say that. But we're federally mandated by the FCC to identify ourselves every hour on the hour. Yeah, and in fact, we're going through a change from an automation system called Audio Vault to iTouch Media, which is, it's all loaded. We buy our music now via digital, and that's how it gets played. We pull it up via digital, and it's all touchscreen now. So you just if I want to say Hotel California, go right into the trash bin, and I'm pulling something I want to hear. There's not too much of that though, but yeah, it's all basically automation with a company called Marketron that does our commercial logs. Music Master does our music logs. It all merges into iMedia Touch, which is the end product that you get to hear with DJs, on-air personalities, squeezing in information in between everything.